All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Torah Studies. Okay, so tonight's topic is all about forgiveness. It's all about forgiveness. And I want to begin by asking you your thoughts about forgiveness, namely the following question. Is it easier to ask for forgiveness or to grant forgiveness? Maybe I want to switch around the question. Is it harder? Forget easier. Let's go the harder route. Is it harder to ask for forgiveness or to grant forgiveness?
To ask.
Ask?
I think.
Okay. Who says ask? Team ask? All right. Okay, good. Team grant? Okay. More asks than grant, I'm going to say.
Depends which.
Depends. Okay, good. That's a good Jewish answer. Yeah, it depends. Sometimes this,
But
sometimes
in
that.
general.
Tonight, we're going to talk about forgiveness, and it's in the context, obviously, of this week's Torah portion. We're going to go into a Rashi, and we're going to get into all the standard, when I say standard, all the usual things that we all love. But at the core of the conversation is going to be forgiveness, and the way we're going to get into that is by I kind of want to go over the narrative arc of this week's Torah portion. The Torah portion is called Chukat, and it gets its name from the opening mitzvah in the Torah portion this week, which is the mitzvah of the para aduma, the red heifer. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this at all because it's not tonight's topic, but I do want to give a little bit about the story because this Torah portion, I think it kind of like falls off the radar. Chukat. If you hear the Torah portion is a chukat, you're like, chukat, what's he talking about? Like, it doesn't immediately ring like, oh. But in this week's Torah portion, here's what happens. It opens with the law. Chukat means like chok is a super rational law. It's the law of the ritual purification rite, R-I-T, of the red heifer. And then it gets into the passing of Miriam, the sister of Moses. By the way, just to remind everybody, this is the end of the 40 years. They've already fulfilled the decree of wandering in the desert and pretty much dying out for 40 years. The Torah, a few weeks ago, Shlach told us about the decree, and then it just kind of moves to the end of the 40 years. We don't really know much what happens in those 38, 39 years in between. We know the first year from the Exodus, and then we know kind of what happens the last year, but those 38 years in the middle, we don't know much. But what we do know is that the events from like a few weeks ago, all of the events subsequently in Torah are all at the end of the 40 years. So Miriam dies because remember, that generation is going to pass away. So Miriam, the sister, right? So Miriam is the oldest sibling, then Aaron, and then Moshe. So Miriam passes away. She passes away first. And the Torah tells us that what happens, the well dries up. There's no water. The people complain about water. We can't survive without water, right? Right? What's going to happen with the lawns? How are we going to get the lawns without water? Kidding. That wasn't the complaint. It was like, we got to drink. So God tells Moses, speak to the rock. What happens? Moses hits the rock and produces water. And for my next trick, now that's amazing. If you can hit a rock and produce water, take that to Vegas, baby. I mean, do that every night. Blue Man Group, forget Blue Man Group, right? Rock Man Group or whatever. I haven't thought of a catchy title yet for that one, but I'm sure we can figure that out.
The Rolling Stoners.
The Rolling Stoners. I love that. All right, don't leave me hanging there. The Rolling Stoners. Good. Oh, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Like the hotel, like the casino would have like fountains. It would be like evocative of the whole situation. Hey, Moses hits the rock. So God says, you hit the rock. Ooh, you're not going to go in either. You're going to pass away before entering the land. Until then, maybe Moses wasn't sure if he was going to be part of the, his generation that's not going in, or maybe part of the exception, the few exceptions, Caleb, Joshua, etc., that we're going to be going in. This historic portion, God tells Moses, not now. Now that you hit the rock, no way. And then we read about a war that gets started, an attack of some Canaanites or Amalekites dressed as Canaanites that attack the Jewish people. Then we read about a miracle that happens there. Then we read about the passing of Aaron. And then we read about how the people were traveling along a long journey because at the end of the 40 years, they think they're going to go in and it's still taking some time and the people begin to complain. And this is where the focus of our conversation tonight picks up. I forgot to mention Oh, I mentioned that Aaron passed away, right? I mentioned that Aaron passed. Mm-hmm. So we have the red heifer. Miriam passes away. Aaron passes away. The drama with hitting the rock, and Moses is essentially punished or told that he can't go into Israel. There's a war there's an attack that happens, and a pushback of the attack. A lot of stuff is going on, but amidst all of this, the people they panic once again. The people panic and they complain, and they seem to go to their go-to statement, which is, "Why did you take us out from Egypt?" Right? We would have been better off staying there, right, than to die in the wilderness. So let's pick up this narrative. David, I'll ask you please to read. Give me 1 second. Let me pull this up for everyone here online. This is going to be text number 1. Here's the complaint, the punishment, and the cure. All right. Well, give me 1 second and take it away.
They journeyed from Mount Hor by way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom, and the people's souls became impatient because of the long journey.
I just want to interrupt for 1 quick second, just to explain Rashi. This is not the Rashi that we're focusing on tonight, but Rashi explains that when it says they journeyed from Mount Hor by way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom, what it means is basically God was leading them, kind of retracing their footsteps that they had traversed over the last, again, 38, 39, whatever years. And the people thought they were going back, and it became very frightening. Take it away, please.
The people spoke against God and Moses, saying, "Why did you bring us up from Egypt to die in the wilderness? There is no bread or water, and our soul loathes this miserable bread."
And although they had water from the well, and Moses had hit the rock to produce water after Miriam's passing, nonetheless, I think it meant there's no natural water source. It's like we have this kind of supernatural water source. There's no bread. There's no normal bread. Our soul loathes this miserable bread. That's referring to the manna from heaven. Ironically, it tasted like everything you wanted, and yet commentators say, it didn't look like much. So much of food is visual. They say 90%. Well, they say 90% of statistics are made up. I'm kidding, but they do say that 90. There's a big percentage of eating is the visual.
God sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and many people of Israel died.
Yikes.
The people came to Moses and said, "We have sinned, for we have spoken against God and you. Pray to God that he remove the serpents from us." And Moses prayed on behalf of the people. God spoke to Moses, "Make yourself a fiery snake and place it on a pole, and anyone who is bitten will look at it and live." Moses made a copper snake and placed it on a pole. It came to pass that if a serpent had bitten a man, he would look at the copper snake and live.
Okay, thank you. So here we have 3 parts of this story. Number 1, the complaint. The complaint takes place over 2 verses, verse 4 and 5. Then we have the punishment, which is verse number 6. And then we have the prayer and healing, verse 7, 8, and 9. And Moses prays on behalf of the people. And indeed, God says, okay, what's the antidote? It's not going to be some snake antivenom, right? Or whatever, but it's rather make yourself a fiery snake and place it on a pole. And so Moses does it. He makes a snake out of copper. By the way, interestingly enough, the Hebrew word for snake or fiery serpent is nachash, and copper is nechoshet. Shares the first same 3 letters. Nachash, nechoshet. In fact, in the Hebrew, it says Moses made nachash nechoshet. You can't make it. It's not. When you read it in Hebrew, you can't help but be like, wait a second, nachash nechoshet. They sound really similar. And indeed, as the commentators point out, God didn't tell Moses what material to make it out of, but he figured, if it's called nachash, let's make it out of nechoshet. He puts it on a pole. You may have seen the American Medical Association logo, which is a snake wrapped around the pole. And you might wonder, why would physicians adopt that as their logo, a snake around the pole? And then you realize, maybe somebody was studying the Torah portion of Chukat and realized that snakes around the pole is a symbol of healing.
Hey, that's interesting. I
Yeah,
never knew that.
American Medical is straight up.
They later destroyed that snake, right?
Say it again?
Like they later, like in Josiah's reign, they destroyed that snake, right?
Oh, that snake on the pole?
Yeah.
Could be, maybe because they was being worshipped or whatever. Yeah, people thought. So it's interesting. It's interesting. The question, so that really is kind of leads to a question. It's just
snake on the pole for the medicals. I didn't know where it came.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So I think the question that everyone's wondering is like, well, 1 second, what's the deal? First of all, we pray to God, not to snakes on a pole. As far as I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's like Judaism is monotheistic, aside from snakes on a pole, which have the power to heal. But like, what's the deal with the snake on the pole? And again, Rashi addresses it. So let's, and this is not going to be the Rashi of today, but let's take a look at Rashi text one. If you don't mind, David, one more text 1b.
Our sages taught, do snakes kill or heal? Rather, when Jews looked to the heavens, thus submitting their hearts to their heavenly Father, they would be healed. Otherwise, they disintegrated.
Thank you. And I'm assuming disintegrated means they died because of the venom. But I think that opening line, do snakes kill or heal? You know, you and I might ask, how could they heal? But you know what our sages asked? How can they kill if not by God's will? In other words, it's almost like we take it for granted, like, oh, snakes, I mean, they'll kill you. If one encounters the wrong snake at the wrong time, I mean, that's it's a little dangerous. But think about that for a second. Hold on. But then we're like, yeah, but a snake on a pole, that makes no sense. How's that going to heal? I mean, you need actual medicine. I mean, a snake killing, it makes sense. But a snake healing, a copper snake on a pole, that doesn't make any sense. The sages say both don't make sense. How can a snake heal? Sorry, how can a snake kill or how can a snake heal? Meaning, God runs the show.
Yeah,
It's not the snake. It's not the snake. It's God running the show. God says, all right, these people are out. They're complaining. After 40 years, you can't even say that this is the generation that was, pardon my pun or expression, snake bitten by being slaves in Egypt. This is not even that generation. These are the kids that are meant to be strong enough to face, you know, the dangers of Canaan and all that. And meanwhile, they're parroting, right? The complaints of their fathers. Why'd you take us out? We would have been better off there. We have nothing to eat or drink. It's almost like this learned behavior. It's almost like, I was actually thinking about it this week. It's kind of like, you know, in a conversation and everyone just reverts back to their talking points, even though they don't make sense sometimes. It's like, oh, there's nothing to eat here. It's like, bro, you got so much food. It's like, you got whatever you need. You have water and a rolling well of water. This rock moved with him. It wasn't a stationary. It moved with them. Like, what's the problem? No, we would have been better off there. All right. So snakes don't kill. It's God that takes life. Snakes don't heal either. So how did it work? Why did he put it on a pole?
Was it to put it up high so
Yeah.
you could look towards that?
Exactly. So he put it on a pole. So when you're looking up at the snake, and you might remember, oh, God Almighty. That was the point. Ramon, jump in.
Oh, I actually didn't even really like the fact that you're like, oh, well, these are several generations or, you know, generation before. Didn't even think that, oh, wow, these aren't the same people making this argument. They're making the same argument as these people way in the past.
It's the 40 years later.
They learned it from their parents.
They learned it from their parents.
Yeah.
It's generational. Oh, I just thought of a good phrase. Look at that. Sometimes, yeah. You get generational trauma. This is generational drama with a D. This is just like you're holding on to the drama of the parents. They were making a big fuss about, you know, oh, we don't want to be here. All right, the same deal.
But is it any different than the children of the Depression who learned about being frugal from their parents?
I would say similar, very similar concept. We are creatures of our upbringing, and I think you're making a very good point. Yeah. Now, the question though is, if it was just about them looking up to heaven, then Moses could have put anything on a pole. He could have put an Israeli flag. I mean, like, why put? Okay, fine. It'll be a little early, but like, why did he put a copper snake in a pole? And it's a little bit ironic that it's the snake or the symbol of a snake, the very thing that's attacking the people. And so for this, let's probe a little bit further and let's get to some commentaries. Text 2a, Ramon, please read this one from the Das Zakenim, which are the Tosafis, the grandsons of Rashi, that comment on, that have a commentary on the Torah.
Make yourself a snake God instructed Moses to fashion a snake rather than something else to magnify his miracles and wonders. He healed them with the very knife he used to strike them. He struck them with a snake and healed them with a snake.
Isn't that cool?
That makes sense.
Right? So why a snake? How ironic. And the answer is, that's right. And God's like saying, isn't it ironic? Right? Up in heaven. I'm kidding. God is not a land. But like, what's the point? It's ironic. It's interesting. Maybe irony is the wrong word here. He healed them with the very thing that hurt them to show that it's all from God. Is a snake an instrument of harm or healing? In God's hands, both. A snake can heal. Sorry, a snake can harm. A snake can also be the source of healing.
Is that no different than vaccines?
Yeah.
You take the whatever it is that's making you sick, you mutate it and kill it and put it back in your body.
Very good.
Yeah.
Rabbi,
You know what?
Rabbi
You kind of, I don't know if that's exactly what Daskanim is saying, but I love what you're saying. And maybe we can say that medically, this is kind of like Torah's like wink at medicine to say, by the way, if you're looking how to heal from the snake, you might want to look back at the snake.
Wow.
Right? If you're looking at at how to heal, like how to get rid of the poison, and you're looking elsewhere, you might need to look at the source of the problem, right? As vaccines do, right? You use the very same, I mean, obviously, however they do it, but you use the same, core essence to fix it. Jay, jump in.
when you go back to the Ivrit, it says make yourself a seraph.
Ah, Aselach HaSaraf.
A little bit different than Nachash.
Nachash Nachoshet. He's like, I like that. We're not going to let this one slip by. It's interesting. Saraf is fiery serpent. Nachash means a serpent. But what's the difference? I don't know. I'm sure the commentaries deal with that. Saraf, that's a very good.
When we talked about getting closer to God, they say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh.
Fire. Oh, I like it. Fiery serpent, right? Don't forget the fire. Forget where it comes from.
Been extremely afraid, like at that moment, of
To looking at
any
snakes.
snake, and kind of going like onto the same thing about vaccines. It kind of makes sense because if you think about, well, like people are, afraid of like nuclear weapons, right? You would be afraid of any nuclear energy being used if you just saw it being used for destructive. But it turns out if we were to use nuclear energy for resources, there would probably be a lot less wars, right?
And I think it's brilliant what you're saying. And I think this also works well. Yeah, but that's all right. That's a different story. I think what's interesting is that it ties into this conversation we're having, ties into what Kabbalah says about it, which we'll do very quickly, and then we're going to get to our main theme about forgiveness. Take a look, one more text. Ramon, I think we're sticking with you on this. 2b, this is from the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad. Look what he writes in 2b.
The purpose of placing the copper snake on a pole was to raise the snake so Jews would look upward. To look down means to perceive the snake's influence as utterly differentiated from God with no hope of reconnecting. However, when the snake is raised, we realize that the snake is also part of God. It is not truly separated, thus neither are its victims, us.
So this gives a little bit of a twist on the entire episode. It's not just that the same thing that's causing harm or that's the source of harm is also the source of healing. It's not just that God is really the source of everything. It's that what you're seeing really is that the snake is not a disconnected entity, but the snake is part of the divine plan. The snake is all part of this larger thing, this larger reality that is divine, and thus that can help reconnect the person. Now, remember, all form of pain, the Kabbalists, the mystics will say this: all pain is derived from one thing, and that is disconnection. All pain is a symptom of disconnection. Disconnecting from someone, disconnecting from source, disconnecting from yourself. I mean, when do we feel the most pain? When we feel internal pain, when we feel like we are, we're not where we need to be. We're disconnected from self, or we're disconnected in a relationship, we're disconnected from God. All three are about connection versus disconnection. And so I think what the Alter Rebbe is saying here is that the snake on the pole reminds us that, well, what is a snake? An instrument of death? A snake is God's creation. A snake is in the employ of God. It's not its own thing that does its own thing. In fact, you know who would have been wise to note that? Adam and Eve. Imagine that. Imagine if when the snake went over to Eve and said, psst, or psst, hey, eat from that fruit. Imagine if Eve would have said, oh, hey, how's it going? I know you. You're hired by God to tempt me. How's the job? How's everything going? How's the pay? How are the benefits? Imagine if she was in on it. Imagine if she saw the snake not as disconnected and therefore scary or persuasive, but she saw the snake as in the literal employ of God. Oh, I know why you're here. You're here to try to convince me. Don't worry about it. We're going to both do our job. You're going to try to convince me, and I'm going to say no. Right? If you're able to do your job, why can't I do mine? Right? Your job is to say yes. My job is to say no. Right? High five. Good. You gave it a good shot. I'm going to give it a good no. All right, now let's go have a beer. Imagine if that was the conversation. When you're in on it, I mean, you can only get hoodwinked. You can only get if it takes you by surprise, oh, I had no idea. Oh my gosh, that thing out of nowhere. It seemed like such a good idea at the time. But if you're I know what this is. I know what this is. Come on, I know what this is. It's the serpent. It's God's test. If you know about it, it sucks the wind out of the whole thing. Eve would have said, "That's so cute. Oh, that's so nice. Hey, what else is going on? Yeah, I'm not going to do that. But what else is going on? How's the job? How's what are the benefits? What's the pay like?" She would have had a conversation, and then it would have been that's it.
Would have been. It's like a disruption.
When you think it's oh my gosh, it's like on par with God. Which one is it? Should I choose God? Should I choose the snake? Choose the snake. The snake is working for God. That's like how did you not see that? The snake on the pole, says the Alter Rebbe, is not just looking up at God and not just realizing that the snake, that which harms you is the source of your healing. And this is true, of course, in trauma, right? The source of your harm is the source of your healing. It's not only that. It's that the source of the harm is also one with God. Don't allow it to become a monster bigger than what it really is. All right. All of this is what we're not going to talk about today, even though we talked about it, because the main theme of tonight is forgiveness. All right. You guys with me? Ready for some forgiveness convo? All right.
I'm still stuck on God causing all this harm.
God causing the harm? Well, the people, they might have brought it on themselves.
Like you said, with the snake.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, look, God created worlds, right? In video games, we would call it God created levels, right? Or universes where there's no snake, right? That's where the angels are. There's no snake. There's no snakes in heaven. It's the title of my new book. Kidding. There's no snakes in heaven, right? All dogs go to heaven, but no snakes go to heaven, right? There's no snakes in heaven. So, and then he's like, well, let's roll the dice on this place. Let's throw some snakes in there. People will take them seriously, and let's see what happens. All right, but let's get into the topic today of forgiveness. Okay. Because what happens next? Maybe not what happens next. Take a look. I want to remind you of a verse that might have seemed weird when we read it. You probably thought it was weird for a half a second, and then you're like, whatever. It's just the Bible being a Bible. Take a look at specifically the verse. Verse 8 of text 1a. All right, we're just going to go back for a moment. Pasuk Ches, verse 8. And God said to Moses, make yourself a fiery snake. Anybody find that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words a little weird?
That's like when they said to make a sacrifice.
Okay, good. Make. Okay, what else? Make yourself a fiery snake.
And then he made a copper.
Well, what word is superfluous there? If you could take out one word, make yourself a fiery snake. Which word? Yourself. Yeah. Why couldn't God tell Moses, make a fiery snake? Why does he say, aseh lecha, make yourself? First of all, he's not making himself into a fiery snake. Imagine that. And for my next trick, I'll become a fiery snake. That's not what happened. Right? And he didn't fashion it for himself either. He fashioned it for the people for the sake of their healing. So why does God tell Moses, "Aseh lecha," make for you, make yourself a fiery snake? What does that even mean? All right, so the commentaries answer this. This is a classic question from the commentaries. Take a look, Toba. We're going to continue with you. Text 3a, Tractate Avodah Zarah. Take a look at what the Gemara, what the Talmud says.
Make yourself a serpent. Yourself means from your funds.
Look at that. God tells Moses, you're going to make a snake, like this copper thing, and you're going to foot the bill for it. You're going to pay for it. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I got to rescue these people, and I got to pay for it. I got to foot the bill. Unbelievable. Can't catch it. Who used to do that? Rodney Dangerfield? No respect. Can't catch it. Right? No respect. Right? Moses, I got to pay for it. By the way, there's very few times where God says a similar thing. Psalacha. Psalacha, shnei luchot habrit. God says before Yom Kippur, the first Yom Kippur in Israel, right, the forgiveness of the sin of the golden calf, God says to Moses, it's time to make a second set of tablets. Yeah. The first tablets, you broke. You broke. You broke those. I say lecha, now you got to pay for it. You know what they say? You break it, you buy it, right? So now Moses, you got to pay for that. And so he indeed carved it. He got the stone, and Moses procured the stone. Fine.
Would the fiery at all relate to how it is you fashion copper?
Could be
that you start with it and then you heat it.
You have to heat it. Could be.
And you fashion it.
Could be a fiery process. So aseh lecha. Why aseh lecha? Why make yourself? Because Moses was going to foot the bill. Okay. Let's take a look at the Orach Chaim. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh, this is from the Gemara, the Talmud says this, so that's something that we know. Comes along the Orach Chaim and he says, this is strange, and I wonder about this. Text 3b.
Make yourself a serpent. The word yourself means from your pocket. What is the reason for this instruction? So
comes along the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, right, the 18th century scholar, mystic, etc., and he says that we know that the word selecha, yourself, means from your own pocket. By the way, your pocket, he doesn't say that. It means from you're going to pay for it. So ask the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, the holy Orach Chaim, and he says, what's the reason? Why? Why did Moses have to pay for it? Let's deepen the question, or let's flesh out the question. Moses didn't sin. He wasn't the one that was complaining. He was the one that was now trying to fix the problem, and God says, well, now you have to pay for it. I mean, I'm sure God hooked him up with whatever he needed to cover it, but why does God put it on Moses? That seems a little strange. It wasn't his. Doesn't seem like it was
Moses' responsibility to have taught the people not to.
Oh, so you could say that maybe it was Moses, as a leader, you're always responsible. You can never say, these people, they don't get it. You always got to take you always got to look inside. My wife tells me all the time in education, she tells me all the time, she says, it's never the kid. I mean, it's never valid to blame the child. So you always have to ask yourself, as a teacher, educator, principal. So I was like, what do we need to do better to make sure that it doesn't get to that point? So maybe along those lines, I think what you're saying, David, is maybe Moses needs to look within himself and say, okay, where did I go wrong, or what have I not done sufficiently that has led to this, repeated behavior over these 40 years? Okay, that could be an angle. We're going to go over a bit of a different angle, and the angle we're going to take is based on a Rashi. And let's do text number 4. I'm going to read this. Text number 4. Rashi. Now, this is where we get into forgiveness. Take a look at text 4. Rashi, on the words Vayit Palel Moshe, and Moses prayed, he says the following. Says Rashi, from this we infer that when asked to forgive, do not be cruel in forgiveness. That's what Rashi says text 4. Yeah. So if someone asks you to forgive, do not be cruel in forgiveness. What does that mean to you? What do you think Rashi is telling us?
Forgive easily.
Forgive easily. If somebody says, I'm sorry, don't say, oh, now you say you're sorry. Pah, I don't accept that. No, you should be forgiving. You should not be cruel, and forgiveness means easy to forgive. Okay. But Rashi doesn't just say that Moses forgave or whatever it was. But Rashi says, from here we learn that when asked to forgive, do not be cruel in forgiveness. And to that, we can push back on Rashi and ask the following question. There seems to be a precedent in the Torah, a biblical precedent, of somebody forgiving when they could have been stubborn and said, no, I'm not going to forgive. And Moses wasn't the first one. In fact, this very phrase of, don't be cruel and not granting forgiveness is said in other sources, other earlier rabbinic narratives about a story that happens all the way back in the book of Genesis, in the book of Bereshit. And it's a story of Avram and Abimelech, Abraham and Abimelech. So let's quickly recap the story. The story goes like this. It's interesting because it happened multiple times. Abraham and Sarah are traveling. And by the way, the Talmud says that there were 4 really beautiful women in history, and one of the 4 is Sarah. So Sarah is one of the most beautiful women in history. Okay. So when Abraham traveled with Sarah, and when he first went to the land of Canaan, God says, go to the land that I will show you. Lech lecha, so the word lecha is over there. The land I will show you. They arrive, there's a famine. They travel, they go down to Egypt. And Abraham tells his wife, let's not say that we're married. Let's tell everybody that you're my sister. And then, maybe the others are going to kill me. Right. So what happens is, they take her, and then whatever happened, and then she's freed, and all ends well. But the story happens again. Even though that was a little bit of a chaotic story, the story happens again years later with Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, the Plishtim, where Abraham again and Sarah say that they're siblings. They don't say that they're married. Abimelech takes Sarah and wishes to be with her. That night, he gets sick. His whole household gets sick. A plague that's physical, ailment breaks out. God comes to him in the middle of the night and says, what have you done? And Abimelech says to God, what have I done? I had no idea she was married, but I'm sorry. And he goes over to Abraham the next day and he says, I'm so sorry. I'm going to give you all this stuff, cattle and whatever. Obviously, your wife and all this stuff, all these gifts. Please pray on our behalf. And indeed, Abraham prays for the healing of Abimelech and his household, and they're healed. And our sages say, from here we learn that you should not be stubborn, you should not be cruel, but rather you should grant forgiveness.
On the other hand, you're not supposed to forgive someone who the crime wasn't against you. You can't forgive for somebody else. Right.
So that's it. So good. You're making a good point. If there's a crime against someone else, you can't forgive on someone else's behalf because you're not the party that that was harmed. But again, in a case where you're the one that's being harmed, where in this case it was Abraham, the guy Abimelech took his wife. So you can say he didn't know, but whatever. So he asked for forgiveness, and Abraham says, sure. And he prays on his behalf. Now let's take a look at this inside. I'm going to read some text over here. Let's read text 5a. I'll read text 5a and follow along. Abraham traveled from there to the land of the south, dwelt between Kadesh and Shur, and sojourned in Gerar. And about Sarah's wife, Abraham said, she is my sister. And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent for and took Sarah. And God came to Abimelech in a dream of the night and said to him, behold, you are going to die because of the woman you have taken, for she is a married woman. And Abimelech had not approached her, and he said, God, will you kill even a righteous nation? That's kind of him saying, like, I understand you wiped out Sodom and Gomorrah because they were, immoral, but I didn't do anything wrong. You're also going to take me out? All right. And a few verses, that back and forth. Okay, next day, 9. Verse 9, Abimelech summoned Abraham and said, what have you done to us? What sin have I committed against you, that you brought upon me and my kingdom a great sin? Deeds that are not done, you have done to me. Abimelech said to Abraham, what did you see that you did this thing? He's kind of saying, like, I mean, you kind of set me up, but either way, I apologize for what I've done. So, and indeed, he tries to make amends. Abimelech took flocks of cattle, men servants, and maid servants, and gave them to Abraham, and returned his wife Sarah to him. All right, well, that's good.
But at the same time, isn't he sort of saying this was all your fault?
He is. So you could say he's also blaming, a little pointing a finger. But at the end of the day, he does give gifts, and he returns Sarah. And we see verse 17, and Abraham prayed to God. And God healed Abimelech and his wife and handmaids, and they gave birth. For God had closed every womb of Abimelech's household because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. And thus the healing comes with the prayers of Abraham. Now, I think, David, what you're saying is, well, in this case, maybe he didn't ask for forgiveness as much as he even blamed Abraham for this predicament in the first place. But that brings out the point even more so. Imagine in a case where the person doesn't even really give us such a heartwarming apology, but even kind of points the blame at you, and you still say, all right, fine, I'm going to pray on your behalf, etc. How much more so in a case where somebody comes with contrition and humility and comes over to you and says, please, I'm so sorry, please forgive me, that you should forgive. Now,
What's he asking forgiveness for? Did he or did he not take Sarah?
He did take Sarah, but he didn't know that she was a married woman.
Oh, okay, because it says somewhere that he had not approached her.
So that means that he was not with her intimately, but he had taken her for that purpose, but nothing had happened.
But nothing happened. So
correct.
He's asking forgiveness.
He does forgiveness for at the end of the day, taking his wife, taking this guy's. Okay, fine. Now take a look at the next text. This is going to be a very key text in setting up the question. Comes along the Talmud, Tractate Bava Kama, and says the following, text 5b. How do we know that it's cruel to withhold forgiveness if asked? It's stated, Abimelech prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech. So Abraham forgives Abimelech and prays for him. So that's how we know that you should grant forgiveness. Now, I need to explain this. I feel like maybe there's an assumed piece of information that I should not assume, and thus we need to go through this very quickly. There is a mitzvah in the Torah that when you do, there's an obligation, a biblical obligation, when you do something wrong, to ask forgiveness. You have to confess the sin. The Torah says, like when animal sacrifice, you had to confess the sin, verbally confess. There's a mitzvah to say, I'm sorry. But the question is, we could have started the class with this. Is there a mitzvah to grant forgiveness? Does the Torah ever say that if somebody says, forgive me, that you have to say you're forgiven? And I will tell you, the short answer is no. It doesn't give us the obligation. But where do we know, says the Talmud, that it's good practice, even if you're not biblically obligated to, but you should? How do we know this, says the Talmud? The Talmud says, Abraham. Abraham forgave Abimelech. Abraham prayed for Abimelech. So too, we should not be cruel and hold on to grudges. We should not be so cruel. If somebody comes and says, I'm sorry, we shouldn't be like, well, that's not good enough. We shouldn't be that person. We should say, I forgive you. How do we know this? Because of Abraham. Comes along Rashi and our Torah portion. Rashi studied the Talmud. He wrote a commentary on the Talmud. Rashi knows the Talmud very well. He knows the biblical story of Abimelech. He commented on that story also 4 books ago. Comes along Rashi right here. And Rashi says, from the fact that Moses prayed for the people, from here we learn that you should not be cruel in forgiving people. Now you're telling me this in the book of Numbers? What about? So the question, look, no one's going to argue that Abraham forgave and that Moses forgave, and they are really fabulous role models for us and our relationships. No one's going to argue. It's more of a technical question on Rashi. Rashi says, from here we derive this good practice of forgiving people that say, I'm sorry. From here, what about Abraham? So that's the question. It's a technical question, but it opens up an entire vista. And I want to share with you 3 dimensions of forgiveness. That's today's topic. Forgiveness. 3 dimensions. And we're going to read this inside, but I want to share outside first, and then we'll read it inside, because I feel like if we read it inside, it might get too confusing, but it's very verbose. So very quickly, 3 dimensions of forgiveness. I'm going to use my hands. You'll see what I mean. Okay? Just to kind of depict things. Imagine here's a baseline. Imagine here's a flat baseline that represents people that you do not know, that you have no relationship with. Okay? People that you have a positive relationship are up here. Negative would be down here. So the median line is no relationship, right? Like, I don't know that person. I have nothing for or against them. That's the ground level. Above, good. Below, not good. Imagine if someone starts off above your friends. And then what happens? And then what happens is they do something. They say something that's hurtful. Now where do they drop? Below the line. And now they say sorry. Now what happens? 3 dimensions of forgiveness. 3 different modalities of forgiveness. Let's break it down. Level 1. This is the most basic level of forgiveness, is where you say, look, I don't know. I don't know if we're ever going to get back to where we were. I don't know if I'm even going to like you anymore. Like, I don't even know if you and I are going to even get back to neutral status, polite baseline status. You might still be down there, but I just don't want that you should be hit by a truck anymore. Maybe I wanted once, God forbid, at one point in time, but now I don't want you to be harmed on my behalf. In other words, I don't want harm to befall you because of what you did to me, even though I'm not forgetting what you did to me, but I don't want you harmed anymore. That's the lowest level. I say lowest, the most basic level of forgiveness is I'm not forgiving you as much as I am, not wishing you ill on my behalf. That's level 1. Level 2 is where you actually forgive the person. Not just you forgive the consequence as a word, but you forgive the person. You say, you know what? You and I can get back to polite status. We're not going to be friends anymore. We're not going to be in love or whatever it is, but we're at least we can be polite to each other. At least baseline, you're no worse than anyone else on the street. The deepest dimension of forgiveness is where you work to the point, you work on yourself and work with the other person to get back to where you were in a good place with that person. 3 dimensions. Again, level 1 is where you no longer wish that person be harmed because of what they did to you. Level 2 is where you're even able to forgive the person and say, you know what? I'm not going to hold it against them anymore. Level 3 is where not only am I not going to hold it against them anymore, we're actually rehabilitating the relationship to get back to a good place. That's the deepest level. Comes along the Rebbe and he says, you know what's going on here? You know why Rashi said from the story of Moses we learn how to forgive and not Abraham? Because what did Abraham do with Abimelech? What did he pray for? He prayed that Abimelech should no longer be punished. What level is that?
1.
That's level 1. From Abraham, all we learn is that forgiveness means I no longer want you to be punished on my behalf. But are we good? Okay, let me ask you another question. Did Abraham and Abimelech kind of go out to dinner? Did they play even top golf together? Did they were they like cordial? We don't know. All we know in that story is that Abraham prayed that Abimelech should no longer be punished on his behalf or on Sarah's behalf. That's all we know. That's level 1.
But was it really Abimelech's fault that anything?
That's what I thought.
Because
okay,
he didn't know.
Abraham should have asked Abimelech for forgiveness.
Right, if he didn't know that she was a married woman.
Yeah, he wasn't doing anything.
I know. So
wrong.
I understand the question. Like, so is Abimelech really to blame here? Okay, good question. I will say this. I don't know if this is like a good answer, but this is in my head. When you're in that position and you have access to intel and everything, can you really get away with saying, I didn't know? In other words, it's coming up next week. Next week's Torah portion is Balak. And with the evil prophet Balaam. And he says to the donkey, remember when the donkey stops in the middle of the journey, he sees the angel, and then Balaam is hitting the donkey, and then and he's beating up the donkey, and then God opens up Balaam's eyes, and he says he sees the angel with the sword. He says, Chatasi, I sinned. because I didn't know that the angel was there. And then the commentaries say, one second, I sinned because I didn't know. If you really didn't know, then why is it a sin? In other words, if you really didn't know, then why is it a sin? And the answer is because you're a prophet, bro. Like, because that's your job. You don't have an excuse that I didn't know. You got to know. That's literally your job. I would apply the same to David Melech. You're the king. Run a background check. I don't know. Figure it out. Or don't take women. Right. Did you ask her?
Completely, right? Yeah.
Thank you, Ramon. Did you ask her?
In those days.
I know that, but maybe that's actually the answer.
He asked and was told they were his brother and sister.
But did he ask her, you want to spend the night?
Exactly.
Did he ask her that question? She probably would have said no if she was asked.
Exactly.
So at some
She's been
point,
killed.
he did something that he shouldn't have done. And but again, the bottom line is from the story of from the story of Abraham, all we learn is that forgiveness means I no longer want you to be zapped and smote by God on my behalf. But whatever happens else to your life, I don't really care because we're not really connected because our relationship is over. But I just don't want you to be punished on my behalf. That's the basic level. What do we learn from Moses, from Moshe, in our Torah portion? We learn a much higher level of forgiveness. What does Moshe do? What does Moses do? He takes he makes the copper snake from his own. In other words, he's invested from his own pocket. He's invested literally and figuratively in fixing the problem and getting the people healed. Not only healed from punishment, but as we said before, what does it mean to look at the copper snake? It means to recognize that the snake is one with God, right? The snake is not a force of destruction on its own. It's being given that mission by God Almighty. There's nothing outside of God. Monotheism. Right? Hashem Echad, God is one, means that God is the only one. There is no other force. It's not like a snake can harm outside of God's decision or God's providence. It's all part. And so what is Moses teaching them? Moses is saying the snake is one with God. You are one with God. And you and me together are one with each other because we're all part of God. And thus he's healing, not just is he addressing, not just is he addressing the punishment, as it were, but he's addressing the relationship. That's the key. He's addressing the core relationship. That's the deepest level. Let's read it inside. This is really beautiful. We'll read it fairly quickly, and then we're going to get to some final takeaways. Take a look. Oh, I love this. The Cadillac forgiveness. 3 types, 6A. All right, here we go. There are many degrees of forgiveness, says the Rebbe, among them pardoning an individual's transgression to shield the offender from punishment. That's the lowest level. Number 2 is exonerating the offender, not just to shield the offender, but because the pardoner bears no ill will, like I don't hate you anymore. And 3, forgiving with a complete heart in a state of complete pacification. The forgiven party achieves the same level of friendship and love with the forgiver from before they committed the offense. In other words, healing the relationship back to the way it was before. Another way to define these 3 types of forgiveness: forgiving the act of offense, forgiving the person who offended, and then erasing, the highest levels, erasing every trace of the offense as if it never occurred. We're back to the way it was before. That's almost symbolic, as if you will, of the second tablets, where you have like another. It's not like, okay, fine, God says I forgive you, but you have the tablets again, like you had originally. The practical difference between these: in the first degree, the pardoner only exerts themselves to the extent that shields the offender from punishment for that specific offense. In the second, and certainly the third, in which the pardon is with a complete heart and the pardoner seeks the welfare of the forgiven party, the pardoner invests themselves. The pardoner makes every effort to rehabilitate the forgiven party until they become as righteous as they were before committing the offense. In other words, the one who's doing the forgiving is invested in the process. And that person might say, I should have a process. I should invest. You did the thing wrong. What? Listen, you hurt me. You offended me. You got to fix it. I'm not getting involved. No. But if you really care about the relationship, then even though you're the hurt party, you're still going to be invested in the process of forgiveness. You'll still be literally invested in that. You're not just going to say, folded arms, like, well, when you come crawling back to me, and then maybe I'll say yes. No, you're invested in it. You're like Moses. You're paying out of pocket for the snake on a pole to fix the problem with the people. You're trying to educate them and bring them back to a place of wholesomeness and connection the way they were before. The people complained, the Torah said, against God and against Moses. Did Moses hold that against them? The answer is no. Did he merely pray for their healing? No. He sought to rehabilitate them. He made a copper snake around and put it on a pole. And it was all symbolic to teach them, to educate them, to transform them, to get them back in God's good graces and in his own good graces, because he cared. Forgiveness on the first level means you don't care. I mean, you don't want them to be hurt, but you don't care about the relationship is over. Even in the second level, the relationship is essentially over. The third level, you care about them. Now, here's the truth. The truth is, not in every situation is it always going to be the third level. Sometimes it makes sense to say, you know what, we're all going to go our separate ways. I don't bear any ill will against you, but nor do I want to interact with you. Like I'm happy if we're, living separate lives and you do your thing, I'll do my thing. I forgive you, whatever that means, but don't come around anymore. That sometimes that's the best we can do. And that's also called forgiveness. But ideally, we climb the mountain of forgiveness. Forgiveness is not something that is static. It is rather dynamic by nature, which means that even if initially we only forgave to the point that we didn't wish them harm, we might then move forward to the point where we no longer bear ill will against them. And we might even then deepen it to the point where at some point in time, we wish to resume a relationship with them. It is a continuum, and it is a dynamic dynamic, and not a static dynamic. I will say this: there's another beautiful intimation, beautiful hint in the words of Rashi. I want to point it out. If you turn back to text number, text number 4b, text 4. You can't make this up. This is Rashi has some of the deepest. Rashi's commentary on the Torah has some of the deepest insights and profundity. It's text number 4. Look what he says. And Moses prayed. That's the quote. Moses prayed, and that means he was invested, right? He wasn't just passively saying like, okay, whatever, but he prayed. From this, says Rashi, we infer not from Abraham, because Abraham was lowest level. From this, we infer that when asked to forgive, do not be cruel in forgiveness. You notice that? He doesn't say do not be cruel to not forgive. Do not be cruel in forgiveness. What does he mean on a much deeper level? If now that we reread this, he means don't be cruel to only forgive. When you're forgiving, don't forgive in a cruel way. Forgive in a kind way, because there's 3 levels of forgiveness. If you only forgive level 1, still a little bit, you're still holding on to it. You're still holding on to your anger. You're still holding on to your resentment. So what Rashi is saying, from Abraham, we learn level 1. That's fine. But from Moses, from Moshe, what do we learn? To not be cruel in forgiveness. Because Abraham's forgiveness might have been a little bit cruel. He didn't care about Abimelech, but Moses did care about the people. Don't be cruel in forgiveness. When you say, I forgive you, don't do it in a cruel way. It's almost like when giving tzedakah. You give tzedakah with a smile, you give tzedakah, it's like, get out of here. Like, don't bother me anymore. Don't be cruel. You can do a mitzvah and still be cruel while doing it. When you're forgiving, don't be cruel in forgiveness. Be kind when forgiving. That means strive for the higher levels. Take a look, and we'll end with 1 or 2 more. It's just, there's such good stuff here. Take a look at what Maimonides writes in his Laws of Teshuvah, text number 7. He writes, Jews are forbidden to be cruel and refuse reconciliation. Instead, we should be easy to appease and difficult to anger. When an offender asks for forgiveness, we must forgive with a complete heart and willing soul. You see that complete heart? Complete heart doesn't mean like, okay, I hope you don't get hit by a bus. It means like authentically to forgive. Even if the offender harmed and offended us greatly, we must neither avenge nor resent. This is the proper disposition of the Jewish people. Maimonides is teaching us what it means to be a good person. What it means is to not hold on too much, to not do that, to not be an achzari in mechila, to not be cruel whilst forgiving. We're not saying to not forgive. We're saying even while forgiving, don't do it in a cruel fashion. Finally, I want to end with this. there's a long-standing teaching within Jewish tradition that says that every mitzvah that Hashem gives us, every commandment that God gives us, is a commandment that He also keeps. Unlike human beings of flesh and blood, where sometimes it's do as I say and not as I do, God only gives us the thing. The values that He shares with us are the values that He also finds valuable. In this case, you couldn't find a better example. You couldn't find a better example. Every day in the prayers, in the prayer liturgy, we say, God, forgive me. In the morning, we say it. In the afternoon, we say it. And in the evening, we also say it. Slach lanu avinu ki chatanu. Forgive us, our Father, because we have sinned. That sounds kind of like another phrase. But we're saying this to God, right? Forgive us, Father, right? Slach lanu avinu. Forgive us, our Father. Ki chatanu. We've sinned. 3 times a day. Every Yom Kippur, every day of atonement. Achet, for this sin, for that sin, for this. Can you imagine a human being dealing with this? Can you imagine a human being? Somebody coming to them 3 times a day, apologizing for the same things. And in between each apology, they did it again. At some point, you would say, please don't come back. Do me a favor. Do me a favor. You're sorry? You're sorry? Are you kidding me? You expect me to take you seriously? You're sorry? I didn't see this coming. I don't know how it happened. I'm so sorry. You're so sorry? I mean, you literally were apologizing for this morning. And now again in the afternoon, and again at night, and again the next morning, and again in the afternoon, and every Yom Kippur, the same things. A human being would say, see you later. The best I'm going to say is, I wish you well. Have a good life. But I don't want any relationship with you. Right? This is crazy. I got to be crazy for forgiving you again and again and again. God, the one thing we know about God is not finite. We're finite. We're limited. God's not finite. God's forgiveness is infinitely abundant, is infinite in its grace and its ability to forgive. If there's any mitzvah that we can say, let's learn how to do this from God, it's forgiveness. Maimonides just gave us a tall order. Forgive with graciousness. Don't hold a grudge. Rashi tells us, we learn from Moses how to forgive in a way that's not cruel, because you can forgive in a way that's cruel, but forgive in a way that's not cruel. And we say, I don't know how I'm going to do this. How are you going to do this? You just turned to God and said, I'm sorry. And He forgave you. Can you not, or can't forget the negative? Can we perhaps take a lesson from how God relates to us and pay it forward to our fellow human being, to forgive others in the way that we pray and we hope that we are forgiven? And so, my friends, as we conclude tonight's lesson, tonight's class was all about forgiveness. And you know what? The title of tonight's class, The Power of Letting Go, is a complete misnomer, because what we've learned tonight is that forgiveness is not letting go. Letting go means whatever. I'm not dealing with you anymore. You're like, we're done. That's what letting go. Forgiveness is not letting go. Forgiveness is saying, let's fix this. Let's work on this relationship together. Now, I know this ending is going on forever. It's the difference between the Irish and the Jewish is that the Irish leave without saying goodbye. The Jews say goodbye without leaving. So in the spirit of Jewishness, one more point. There are some situations where Jewish law tells us you don't have to forgive. Like if there's an abusive situation that's still ongoing, etc. And it's one of the texts has it here. I didn't read it because there are situations, certainly situations where even Jewish law would say you could just walk away from that. You don't have to but in most cases, Judaism asks of the aggrieved party, the one that's the victim, to be so invested in the healing of the perpetrator, to go with them on the journey, to help them on the journey. You say, that's such a tall order. God does it with us. We can ask it from God. We can pay it forward. At the very least, you would think. And I would say when we pay it forward, we can say to God, look, I've done it. You're God. You can't do it for me. Look, I embraced this guy. This guy did this X, Y, and Z, and I still embraced him. God, embrace me. And may God embrace us. And God certainly does embrace us no matter what. And no matter where we've been, what we've done, God says, I got a place for you at the table. We should have a place for each other at the table, not just Avimelech style, see you later, alligator, but at the table, right? Step by step. Step one is see you later, alligator. Step two is a little closer, Top Golf. Step three is at the table. All right. Hope that made sense today. Made sense? All right. Good.
Yes, you call it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, comments, rebuttals. All right.
Beautiful.
I apologize if I offended anybody. I'm kidding. You see that? I'm asking
I
for.
don't know how to pronounce his last name. Is yes.
Hey, Rhonda. Good to see you.
Hi.
Hey, we got
Yeah.
Ramon right here.
Hi, grandson. I got in.
You have a very, very special grandson, and it's a treat to be able to have him here at the classes.
And you like to be called
Yeah.
special.
Oh, glory to God. Oh, glory to God.
Good
Love
stuff.
you, Ramon.
All right, good stuff. Good. All right, a few quick announcements. Obviously, next week we're having a class, as always. Coming up a week from tomorrow, this is an amazing class. It's called, oh, the camera's following me. It's called Fascinating Facts. Seriously. This is going to go through some of the biggest, debunking some of the biggest myths and mysteries of Judaism. We're going to go through, I mean, each class is a different topic, different area of conversation. Some are about biblical myths and mysteries. Some are about Jewish practice. Some are about Jewish culture and tradition. Some are about food, life cycles, holidays. You name it, it's covered. Spiritual, supernatural stuff. Everything's in this class. You will become so well versed in Fascinating Fact through this course that you will be the winner of all your Trivial Pursuit games in Judaism. You remember those Trivial Pursuit? Remember that game, that board game? Anyway, all right. Good stuff. That's coming up a week from tomorrow, July 9th. All right. Wishing everybody a good week. Enjoy the holiday. Stay safe. And we'll see y'all soon. Pleasure.
Beautiful.
Rhonda, great to have you here. Danny, Susan, Larry, Vlad, Jay. Hey, good to see you guys. To good health and to only good things.